Hi Chris, thank you so much for sending these through. Second time lucky. Sorry I wasn't able to download the files whilst I was out in the Serengeti, but was very excited to see these pop up on my screen. And again, another fantastic reminder of a great trip. I know this was your first trip with Wild Eye, first trip into the Delta, first trip with a camera or a DSLR that you'd originally brought and now the mirrorless along the way. And I do hope that you had a great time and that these images bring back a lot of memories for you. So let's get right into it and kind of start looking at a bit of a constructive crit here. I love this shot. I think the composition of it works really well. I love the contrast of these two little letcheri on the top right hand side here, balanced by the grasses on this side with the fallen tree and the shadows and the light and everything down here. I like the fact that it's gone into black and white as well. I think that it lends itself to that, especially given these deep shadows, which provides the real contrast that you're looking for in a frame like this. So well done, and great composition on this one. This is one of my favorite images, and I know you shared some shots of the prints that you had done, which again, you've done an incredible job by getting to the stage where you've actually printed out a bunch of images from a safari. There are a lot of our guests who haven't got that far, so well done on that. But this is a great shot, made all the more special by the fact that it wasn't easy for us to photograph this young male leopard. I remember people leaning over the side trying to shoot through the foliage, and initially I think a couple of the guests, when we first arrived and they didn't have a clear shot through that foliage, they were a little bit despondent about the sighting, but with a little bit of creative vision and some persistence, I think it's safe to say that we created probably one of the most special and unique images of the trip. Enough about that. From a processing point of view, I think you've done a great job here. Obviously focusing on the subject to begin with. Love the colors, love the vibrance. If anything, I would say that it feels a little bit warm. And so from a color temperature perspective, to be able to just kind of cool that down just a little bit. But again, this is a look and feel. You can see that warm cast across the image. I would say that a more realistic view would be somewhere along these lines here. But again, that is a personal preference, and this is a little bit more of a creative interpretation of that, and I think it works very well. Just to reiterate, I know I said this in the field, but leopard is shy and secretive by nature. So being able to shoot through this foliage gives you a sense that you're kind of peering into their world, that you're almost a voyeur in a sense. And I absolutely love that. I think these kind of images have a whole lot more depth and emotion to them than just a stock standard, hey, here's a leopard out in the open. From a visualized, like a sighting perspective, we always want to see them out in the open, but when the vegetation like we had here lends itself to it, it can make for far more interesting images. Absolutely love this shot. Well done. I like this image as well. I think at first the Goliath heron that we've got down here in this bottom left-hand corner is not as immediately obvious to the viewer as we would like. So if I think about how we could look to do that, there are a couple of ways. So I'm just dropping the blacks here to make the water a little bit more dark, and then stretching out these lights to make the vegetation punch just that little bit more. In terms of dialing up our subject here, what I'd like to do is use a radial filter, which is going to be inverted, to coach our viewer's eye towards our subject. And so in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to drop the exposure of the surrounding areas. And you can see here that if I go to before and after, you'll see that that heron just becomes a little bit more prominent in that frame. Why this works is because we've got the uniformity of all the other vegetation, but then this gray set against the black of the water that provides the contrast to anchor this frame. So if this bird had been against the greenery, it wouldn't have held as much gravity in the frame as it does now. So all we've done here is just corrected the darkness of the water. You can see it's a little bit light here, and then used a radial filter to push the viewer away from this top right-hand section and bring them down towards here. So we're amplifying the contrast between the subject and the background. But a lovely storytelling image, and not an easy one to actually shoot. And I'm glad to see it in your selection, because it means that you're kind of thinking outside of the box a little bit. This is also a really cool image. I like the kind of the mood to it, because this was, I think, in the morning where there was still a bit of smoke around, but we can see the journey that the elephants are walking through. So you've got this journey from the bottom right, where you've got this bright water coming through, the elephants on this path, the lechwe, and then the path running out towards the top left-hand side of the frame. I think you've done well to crop this into 16:9. The one potentially distracting element is this line across the top here, and that's a road, which we could maybe look to kind of negate to a degree by cropping something along those lines over there. And I think that makes it a little bit more of an interesting image. But I love the fact we've got 3 Ellies. Odd numbers always work well in photography and design, and I love the way that they're moving through the frame. And it also just goes to show that you don't always have to have the subject looking straight at you. There can be a different story with these guys walking away from the camera. This is lovely as well. I love the colors of this. Again, slightly warmer, but I think that's maybe a personal preference and a kind of style that you're picking up on. Love the little detail of these tiny little tusks from this little Ellie looking at us. Really well exposed to get some of the detail through the dark shadows there, but you haven't lost any of that there. And I love the kind of color combination of these blues, the yellows and the greens, how it all comes together, the texture of the palms and this tree out here, and then these 2 Ellies with their white tusks. This is a really cool shot, Chris. I really like this one. This was an amazing sighting. Not the easiest, and because we've got this tree, this fallen tree, it becomes a little bit busy, but we've got all these Ellies in here. Potentially different crops. We've got this one coming out of the frame and just kind of on the edge, so maybe we could look to exclude that and just have these guys over here. If we didn't like this tree and then we wanted to try and exclude that very prominent branch against the white of the water here, which holds a lot of gravity in the image because of this contrast, we could look to crop in a little bit more here and just have something like that. We explore what we include up at the top there. Maybe we come in just a little bit more to do something along those lines, and that as a different crop, we could take care of that using the spot removal tool. But I just wanted to use this as an example of how you can explore the original image to create different stories in other images. Ideally, we would have liked this Ellie on the edge here to be included in the frame, so even if we did something along these lines here, perhaps that's an even stronger composition for you on that shot. Love the fact that this entire frame is actually anchored by this Ellie with its trunk up, having a sniff around at what's going on. Very well processed and well captured. This is a very cool moment. I love the fact that through depth of field, this eagle is sharp and in focus, and then the roller is soft in the background. And you can see that there's a bit of tension in this image. I think from a cropping perspective, you've understood the rule of thirds. You've placed your subjects bang on where they should be. If anything, Chris, is to add a little bit more exposure to this image, just to lift the details out just that little bit more, and you'll see that that's very well processed. Another option in terms of a storytelling type shot would be to do, because it is a bit of a more intimate moment, would be to do something along these lines, and giving a little bit more space at the bottom of the frame to emphasize height. So you can see here it's a little bit more intimate, tighter crop, but still really, really cool storytelling image. So if I just reset that, there we go. So definitely would just lift the exposure just a little bit more here to bring out some detail into these shadow areas. Very, very well processed. This is cool. I like you've tried the high key black and white process here. Things look a little bit brighter on the screen that's recording through here rather than on my laptop, and I think you've done a good job. Love the detail on the zebra, blowing out the highlights on these grasses in the foreground to leave a little bit more contrast around the zebra itself. And I think that's been well processed as well. Again, throwing a crazy idea out for different compositions and, thinking outside of the box. Don't forget that we've always got the option, especially if you're in the field when you're thinking about this, to think outside of the box and start looking for more abstract kind of shots where, tell me it's a zebra without telling me a zebra. I'm sure you're tired of hearing me say that, but thinking outside of the box will really help your photography to progress to the next level. And I think you've got a good eye for these sort of things. So that's just a little bit of extra information that I thought I'd share on that one for you. Right, let's have a look. This is great. I think you've done a really good job of intentionally cropping this image in this way to kind of tell the story and to show the numbers, because it is not easy to photograph this many cheetah together at once, and you've done a fantastic job. I would lift the exposure just ever so slightly on this frame. I love that you've got mom staring. I love the footfall, the position of this front leg, the three youngsters moving around her here. And again, the way that you've cropped this is fantastic. It works so well. It is such an unusual crop, and not a lot of people would have gone to that for this sort of shot. So really well done. I have nothing else to add from a processing point of view on this image, because I think you've done a fantastic job. It's really just the exposure. It looks really, really good, and not an easy sighting to have worked, so well done. This is also a fantastic shot. Really like the big eyes, and as we know, he was looking at impala in the distance, and he later tried to hunt but had fluffed that one. And I love the texture of this log in the foreground as well. I know we spoke quite a bit about composition and how, and making the most of a very difficult and rather busy situation, to be very honest. So well executed. Love the catch lights in the eyes. Love the detail of the kind of whiskers above the eyes as well. And very well processed once again. So this particular shot, I feel like we could maybe just lift the exposure a little bit more. He feels a little bit dark to me, so lifting that exposure and then just recovering some more of those highlights in the background. You'll see the difference there before and after, and maybe then just dropping out blacks just a touch, and you'll see that the tree then becomes a little bit more punchy. But a beautiful shot. This guy really put on a show. If I really wanted to be picky, and these are the finer details that you start to think about when you pull into a sighting. And once the "oh my word, it's a leopard" starts to kind of that energy kind of runs through your veins a little bit, it's to start to think a little bit more about what the subject is doing. And so in this instance, I would have loved for this ear to have been perfectly cocked and being the same as this ear here. And that may not have happened in the sighting, I don't know, but maybe have a look through the images that you've got from the sequence and see if there is one of those there. But yeah, very, very cool. Great detail here. Love the kind of the balance. You've balanced exposure for the highlights and the shadows here quite nicely. Like the leading line that runs through there. If anything, maybe a slight crop here just to try and maybe even a twist here just to try something a little bit different. Have that angle run through the frame and put that eye just on the rule of thirds there. But you can see well balanced to have all the detail in this section preserved while still showing the shadows here, and then the contrast of these eyelashes against the eye. Very well done. And again, that was the kind of thinking outside of the box, going in for a little bit more of an abstract type shot that you've executed very well. This is great. I'm guessing this was that lion that was standing guard on the buffalo kill in the middle of the day, and there was a vulture flying over. I seem to recall this moment from that sighting. Harsh light, bright light, mid-morning, hot, and a bit of a challenge, really. And you've done a really good job of making sure that that eye is bang on as that vulture is flying over. Everything here looks very good to me. Maybe just tease out some of the whites just a little bit more and make him pop against there. But not great light, not an easy situation, and you've processed this very well. I like the 16:9 crop, looking at your rule of thirds, placing the subject right on that PowerPoint there. And this one, this came through, I don't know if this was an iPhone photo or if this came through on your camera, but it's been, if I have a look, if I show you at full screen, at 100% size, it's come through as a very small file. But I love it. This was obviously the Thanksgiving pride of lions that had their Thanksgiving meal. And just a lovely scene. And it actually made me think that I don't necessarily take as many wide angle shots as one should out in the field, because I love the way that this tree anchors the frame, lions lying off on this left hand side, the palm trees in the background. It's just a lovely scene. And so you've kind of inspired me a little bit here to think about using wider lenses and not just my iPhone for these kind of shots. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that is the collection, which is a wonderful collection. And again, for the context of this being one of your first safaris, and for the first time using a camera to any real serious extent, I think you've done an incredible job. Thank you for taking the time to share these with me. I hope that you found the crit and the input that I've shared with you here to be constructive, and look forward to keeping in touch and helping you plan another adventure sometime soon. Cheers, take care.